I just did a profile on the kid. He went to Bryant and then went to Gannon, Corey Curtis.
Okay.
So I'm sure you know his dad. His dad's, a pretty good guy. But, I mean, it's Bryant's Northeast, obviously.
Yep.
I'm originally from New York, so.
Okay. Yeah, he's a New York kid, this kid is.
Where's he at?
I forget where he went to high school, but he's kind of bounced around a little bit.
The city or upstate?
I'm not sure. Our quarterback coach is kind of taking the lead on him, so I just know we're trying to fill in a quarterback or two, and so he's been doing most of the talking. He just wants me to put together the final offer, be the money guy.
Well, I mean, and we're live, by the way, so we're just kind of, this is the best part when you just kind of roll into it. Right?
Oh, okay, there you go.
Speaking of quarterbacks, 1 for 1, 11 yards at Colorado. What we got going on, right? You like that right there?
Yeah, that was a fun time, kind of a fun story with that is we had been planning that fake field goal, and my mom went to Iowa State. It just kind of happened to work out there. My mom went to Iowa State. My aunt's a big Iowa State fan, and Iowa State that year when we were playing them was really good. Yeah. They had like Seneca Wallace at quarterback, and I mean it was a fight. We were in it.
Greatest scramble I think I've ever seen. On you know what I'm talking about, where he ran 97 yards and one for a 7-yard touchdown.
Yep, that guy he was special, and that was our 01 year that we at Colorado won the Big 12 championship, and so that was a big game, and they were a good team. We weren't playing great, but I kind of looked at Coach Barnett and I'm like, hey, you want to run the fake here? And he gave me the approval, so went out there, called it, and kind of the fun part beyond the completion is just getting to throw the ball to Dan Graham, who was the Mackey Award winner.
First round pick to the Patriots.
Yep, first round pick. Played, I don't even know how long. He played 8 or 9 years.
He's got a couple pieces of jewelry.
He does.
So,
he does. Lives in Denver still. But I was kind of joking with him because it wasn't. I'm not going to say it was a great pass, but it came in a little slower. I think he bobbled it. But he got the first down. It was that was definitely a special memory for sure.
I couldn't find it on YouTube. I was searching last night, and because I did the deep dive. I like to say I do a little bit of homework before I have guests come in, so it's just not very bland on the interview. And it's like, okay, wide receiver, coach quarterbacks and whatnot. It's like all you see is 1 for 1, 11 yards, and I was like, it's got to be a fake or something goofy like that.
It was. You can find it. It's either you gotta dig up the Colorado versus Iowa State 01 highlights, or it might be on if you look the 2001 season highlights for Colorado, but I've found it a couple times, but you definitely have to dig.
Or I'm sure your mom has it. I saw a couple of your interviews. She's always commenting and whatnot. So.
Mom doesn't miss anything on social media. She's better at social media than I am.
I'm sure she'll be sharing this when I post it all around.
Oh yeah.
So
sure.
You're from Colorado, obviously. Natural dream. Kid goes to Colorado, especially in that time frame, coming from, Vance Joseph, the quarterback, Coach Neuheisel was the coach. Eric Bieniemy was on that team. I think there's a linebacker, Chad Brown. He was a Pro Bowler guy as well. So it's like
that 89, 90, like really the early 90s through 94. I mean, they were really, really good.
So as a kid, seeing that, obviously the college career, and being this no disrespect, wasn't crazy amazing for you, but still being a part of that and able to go to Colorado.
Yeah.
I always think like a guy like you who, had minimum playing time in school, do you ever look back on that and you're kind of like, could I have went to like an NAI school or, instead of Colorado State? Like, do you ever think about stuff like that sometimes?
I don't think about it, but it's funny you bring that up. Like, it is something I talk to our recruits about a lot, honestly. Yeah, because they have to make their story their own, right? And I think you hit on something that is exactly what I was feeling. Like when what people don't also realize is my dad was the associate AD and had worked his way up at Colorado. So he went to Colorado, started in the ticket office as a student, worked his way up. He was in the business and ticket office for 38 years, and is actually in the Colorado Hall of Fame,
Okay.
you know, out there. And so I grew up around University of Colorado athletics.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to my first football game when I was 6 months old, you know, was sat in the end zone with my buddy when I was, you know, 5th, 6th grade, and we'd raise the nets for the field goals, and was at pretty much every home game, watched when Rashawn went for 2,000 yards when I was, you know, from field, and went to bowl games because, you know, before there was a director of football ops, that was really my dad's job.
Yeah.
He did all the travel arrangements for football. I want to say he had 450 plus straight games that he didn't miss, home and road. So there was a lot of that was just part of me. So like when you say grew up in Colorado, grew up in Boulder, and it was a dream, it was, but it was so much a part of who I am, and who I still am. You know, my parents still live in Boulder. We don't get back there as much as I'd like just because of coaching and having kids and all that stuff. But, you know, still today walking into Folsom Field gives me chills, you know. And so that was my dream. And, yeah, I walked on, eventually earned a scholarship. You know, I don't have the stats that people have or didn't see crazy amount of playing time, but I wouldn't trade it for anything because it was my dream, you know. But it is something that I bring up to recruits is that, you know, you can chase that. And I think if you have like a legit reason of this is why I want to go to Lindenwood or Mizzou or you name it, do it. But if you want to get on the field and you want to have, you know, all conference or you know, make a legitimate impact, then I think you need to think about what level. And there, I think you're right. There's no doubt had I gone to an NAI school, had I gone to a D2 school, I would have had a much bigger impact. But that being said, you know, the memories, the people, the experiences that I had, I wouldn't trade for anything, you know, and they fit me.
Well, it's also, like you said, I could have went to, you know, these smaller schools and whatnot, but the biggest thing is how much it meant to you as a family and whatnot. It's kind of like, it's no different than like I was a firefighter at one point. Dad was a firefighter. Just, you know, different family business you went into, and to, you know, kind of close that chapter and just be like, I did it, you know, like, you know, my family's legacy continue to live through me. It's pretty awesome. How much of an impact did you have with like Coach Neuheisel and Coach Barnett and something, you know, I was doing a deep dive on Coach Barnett. He's actually from here, and is that just happenstance and whatnot, or did he kind of like play an impact in your coaching career? Because he, and correct me if I'm wrong, went to 07 and you were there in 03 and 04, 05 as a GA.
I was there less. I was there as from 98 to 02 as a player, and then the spring of 03 I worked as like a what they called a video GA, which was, you know, at the time I really worked with the GAs with the defense. You know, my time with Coach Neuheisel was great. You know, Coach Neuheisel was only there my first year, so 98, and then he took the job at Washington. But you saw a really different style of coaching. You know, Coach Neuheisel was very much a player's coach. We did a lot of different fun things, fun activities. He was a tremendous recruiter. I mean, the talent that we had was, you know, ultimately my class and really the 97 class, which are the two main groups that, you know, went on to win the Big 12 championship. But throughout the time that Coach Neuheisel was there, he had some really good talent. And I think as Coach Barnett came in, we had good talent too. They, like his staff did a great job recruiting, but he was a different style coach. You know, much more. You know, it was. I mean, we went to work. You know, I mean, it was it was tough love. It was, you know, grind you, push you, which I think we needed that ultimately. You know, I think that balance of is ultimately what got us over the top. But Coach Barnett was. I think Coach Neuheisel was one of those guys that like you really liked and respected and liked playing for. He had a great staff. I mean, the guys that were on that staff, you know, my position coach at wide receiver was Coach Durrell, who, you know, just was the Colorado head coach, but has been in the NFL for a long time and tremendous coach. Then Coach Barnett comes in, and I think Coach Neuheisel was like one of those guys that you liked right then.
Yeah.
Coach Barnett was one of those guys that you probably didn't like because he pushed you so hard. But then when you're done, you just really respect and admire everything that he taught you. And obviously I spent more time with Coach Barnett, and when like the bulk of my playing time, like career there at Colorado, when I was not just a scout team guy, like Coach Neuheisel was there my freshman year, so or my redshirt year, so I didn't interact with him as much, but he gave me an opportunity, which I forever am grateful for. But then Coach Barnett, you know, he has been a guy that has supported me throughout my coaching, you know, by giving me that first shot to even help out in that spring of 2002. He knew I was looking for a GA job, knew I hadn't found anything. It's like, hey, look, let me give you this. And I would have stayed doing that. But, you know, I started dating my now wife and, you know, moved out to this area. But then he helped me get a job out here and has been a great source, somebody that I can call and talk to. You know, even a couple months ago, I called him. I said, hey, here's something I'm really feel like I'm struggling with. What is your advice? And, you know, get on the phone with him and have that conversation. So he's been a great mentor. He's been a great, just somebody that I've looked up to. And you know, him being from this area is just kind of happenstance. He went to Mizzou, but it's funny because, you know, I mentioned my dad being around the program for so long. You know, Coach Barnett was on the Colorado staff when they won the national championship back in '90, and his son Clay and I played Little League baseball together. And then he took the job at Northwestern, and Clay moved away. Well, then here it comes back, and you know, I would never forget, like right after he got hired, he called me into his office like for a one-on-one and was like, look, I know I've known you for a long time. I know you know Clay. I know your dad works here, but just so you know, I'm not going to treat you any different. And you're going to have to work and earn it. And I respect that. You know, I love the fact that he, you know, knew all that, remembered all that, but then, you know, still held me to a high standard and said basically like, look, you got to go earn it no different than anybody else.
If not higher, probably, because he, you know, there is always like the nepotism and whatnot in college sports or any sports really, you know, going from, you know, Little League to even the pros, when a guy has a quarterback in his system and continues to be on the roster despite, you know, his play and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think that's really awesome. Like, especially like just the happenstance of the St. Louis thing. And then you probably like looking back at, you know, where you were at 2002, 2003 to like today. And you're just like, all right, cool. You know, it's pretty wild.
And I'll tell you what, throughout that time, and one of the things that, you know, I feel like God kind of did things for a reason, right, is, you know, as a wide receiver there, I didn't, like I said, didn't have the greatest stats, greatest career, whatever. Had the one fake, but there was a ton of things that I did do that was memorable. But he put me around some great coaches. Yeah. You know, I got a chance to work with some great coaches in that spring. You know, Coach Barnett being a tremendous head coach to play for, got a chance to be teammates with guys that I still keep in touch with that are, you know, played in the NFL, guys that are from this area. So, you know, just all of that together, I mean, it was invaluable.
I was talking to a guy, his name is Joey Ivy. He played at U of F and then, you know, played in the NFL, like a fringe guy and whatnot. And we kind of talked about it out in the warehouse is like, you know, Joey felt like his career wasn't enough. You know, he played in like 7 NFL games, I think kissed like $900,000, you know, as far as contracts. But when he went to the USFL, you see how good he knew how good he had it because there was a guy who only went to a training camp or a mini camp and he's grinding in the USFL. And it's like, when you start putting things in perspective, like in my opinion, in your football career or just in life in general, you just value like how good you had it. Like there's coaches that are like uber jealous of you and you're probably like, man, like, yeah, I wish I had a couple more stats, you know, like, or whatnot. But like when you put in perspective of like how good we all have it and whatnot, like in our careers, it's kind of like, okay, it's not, you know, it could have been better, but it could always be better, but it always could be worse, you know? And
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And one of the things over the years I've learned, and I've struggled with it for a long time, but the idea that comparison is like the worst thing you can do.
Oh, I do it. I do it all the time.
Yeah,
it kills me.
and I used to do that terrible. For the longest time, my best friend and still my we talk all the time was a first round draft choice. So, and he worked his butt off. Like I know all the things that he did throughout college and everything too, because we were together all the time. But you're sitting there and it's easy to look at, well, geez, he's first round draft choice, he's playing on Sundays and making millions of dollars, and I'm struggling out of high school trying to get my coaching career going. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned as I look back is that, like I said, comparison is the worst thing you can do. I mean, there's guys that are on our team right now that make All-American, make All-Conference, and they have all these stats, and that's something I can't go back to. I can't say I was an All-American in college. I can't say I was first team All-Conference. And so for that, I know what they put in, and I know that that's a big deal. It doesn't just have to be at the Division I level, and all of our experiences are unique and special. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned over the years is that I was fortunate. I chose my path. I wouldn't change a thing, and been blessed with it.
Now, kind of, doing a little time hop here, but since it's fresh in my head, talking about obviously your best friend from college, coming to a school, the amount of work that you've probably had to put in for building this program, one is its own podcast episode, but when you have a kid that comes to you, and we'll touch on that a little bit later, when you have a kid that comes to you and is like, hey, I want to go to the NFL, coach, and you have this back pocket, I don't want to use the word Rolodex, but this back pocket of information, be like, well, this is, John Smith, number 7 overall pick, when I played with him, this is what he did. This is what you're doing. Find the deficiency guy. Is that something like you can push these kids a lot? And because I talked to Coach Stewart about that, and he's like, well, you want to go to the NFL? I coached, this player, you're not doing that, buddy.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I think the hardest thing that I face is that balance between love and truth.
Yeah.
Because the last thing that we as coaches, and Coach Stugart's a great friend of mine, yeah. I know as any of us coaches, we don't want to crush somebody's dream, right? And, we also don't want to say what they can and can't do. It's, it's not for me to sit here and say what you can do or what you can't do. It ultimately is going to come down to the work that you put in and how much you do. Now, we as coaches have to point out, like you said, the deficiencies, right? Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that parents and players don't understand is the genetic aspect that just rules you out.
Yeah.
Right?
Like looking at me, I'm 5'7". It's probably not going to happen, Cheech.
Right. And same thing for me. As a wide receiver coming out of there, the NFL's not looking for a 6 foot, 175 pound wide receiver that runs a 4.6.
Yeah.
Now, could I compete at that level? Yeah, I could. I could compete, but I wasn't one of the top.
Yeah.
And like you take Tyler, that was my roommate, as a first-round draft choice as a defensive end. He was 6'6", 270, 75 pounds when he was drafted, and went to the combine and ran a 4.65.
Yeah,
that's right in line with what they want.
Yeah, the prototypical size. All the now they call it traits and something, but a couple of years ago it was intangibles.
Right, yeah. Right. And so actually one of the things that I had one of our grad assistants do during recruiting this year is put together a chart of the average size, weight, 40, you name it.
Yeah, the measurable. Yeah.
The measurables for all of the different positions at the NFL Combine. Yep. And my point in showing that to recruits was right away just saying, like, look, if you don't meet these, you're probably not going to the NFL.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean you can't have a great college career.
Yeah.
And that's where I think people get lost in the weeds. Like the number of people that actually make it to the NFL is so minuscule, yeah. And it's so special and so elite. It's hard for anybody to get an idea. Having been around those guys, like I can tell you firsthand how elite they were, but that is a challenge, I mean, most of our players, I don't care where you go, they're not going to make the NFL. You could go to Alabama and every senior is not getting drafted to go to the NFL. So that is a fine line, but yeah, I mean, using those sometimes I will. I mean, I've got a picture in my office of our 01 team, and I'll walk over and be like, okay, this guy played X number of years in the league. This guy played X number of years in the league, and this is how big he is. Are you that? Well, no, but I can still compete. And it's like, well, all right, And sometimes you just got to let them go and find out on their own. But it is a challenge.
What is it? Lead a horse to drink or something like that.
Yeah, lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's a tough reality, right? I mean, it's a tough reality when you say, hey, this is a dream of mine, and I'm not going to realize that dream. Yeah. But that's where I think there's too much within our society on making it to that level. There's too much emphasis from early on.
Are you talking about as far as like if you don't attain X goal? Like I guess it goes back to comparison bias, but if for you or me or whatever, like I need this podcast to get to 1 million subs. You need to be the head coach of Alabama. If we don't do that, we're failures. And your head collegiate coach, my stuff is growing, still successful, but like. Are you kind of saying, like, if these kids don't make it to the NFL, then, like, what did you do all this for, in a sense?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from family members, and they build that up within their kid, and it puts a lot of pressure on them. And it's not just football. I mean, it's basketball, baseball, softball, you name it. Sports in general, there's so much money around it anymore that, I think there's a lot of family members that are like, hey, you need to make it to the league so that I can retire and we can change our situation or whatever that might look like. And it's just not realistic. That's not the pressure that these guys need. And ultimately as coaches, we end up kind of dealing with that because there are some guys that come in and be like, well, we actually had a guy that quit after his freshman year, and when he quit, he was a good player. And I asked him, like, why are you walking away from this? You're walking away from a scholarship. You're walking away from an opportunity to get a degree. Those are the most important things. And his comment to me was, well, if I'm not going to make the NFL, what's the point? And that's sad because the point is so much bigger than that, right? I mean, with you and the podcast, like even if you don't hit 1 million and you hit 750,000, that's still a lot of people that you're reaching and you're touching and they're taking different things from you. Yeah. It doesn't make you a failure.
Well, I'll even dumb it down even better. It's like, if it wasn't for this career resurgence transition, like I would never met you. I would have never met Coach Stu, like, Coach Anthony Beck, like go down the list of like, coming from my industry, I had a pretty ridiculous Rolodex, and now like it's completely separate. Like the amount of people in sports and like reinvigorating like my love for coaching is all because of this. So like 750K would be amazing, but like, for me, and I'm sure for these kids, like the people you meet and like the opportunities and like, I kind of want to touch on this later, but with Mobab, like you guys are hosting the XFL showcase. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be there? Some pretty, I don't want to get, sound starstruck here, but some pretty amazing people in this game that they're going to have the opportunity to meet. Because I'm sure even your underclassmen are probably going to have like, hey, I don't know, and I don't want you to reveal anything that you're not supposed to, obviously. But, let Brian do that. But, these guys are going to meet possibly the head coach. Heard a University of Alabama guy might be showing up, like these are experiences that these kids are going to invest in. You're walking away because you can't be a part of the NFL. Like, to me, that gets a little goofy.
It does. And I think I'd echo that by just saying kind of your opening question, even though, I don't have the stats, does that mean my college career was a failure? And I would say no. Now, somebody else might say yes, but I would argue no because it set me up for where I'm at. It gave me tremendous experiences. I got to meet a ton of people that I wouldn't know if I wasn't in that world.
Yeah.
So, I think that's where you really just have to sit back and look at the big picture. Is what is the end goal? And one of the things we talk about within our program is the end goal is to get a degree.
Yeah.
And that was ultimately my goal of going to college anyway.
Yeah.
So I have a degree from the University of Colorado. I got to play with some great athletes. I got to be coached by some great coaches.
Yeah.
And those people I still keep in touch with today. And for that, I'm blessed. And same thing at MOBAP. Like you get to make lifelong friends. You get to be around some coaches that can help you on down the line, just like my coaches help. And, I think you got to find the blessings and you got to find the good in whatever you're doing and try and keep things in perspective.
I think I don't think there's much else we could either go back and forth, talk in circles on that. So coming to MOBAP, and we'll take a break in just like 5 seconds for our fake sponsorship of Smart Water, have Joe reset the camera. Building this program for McKendree, back and forth between the high school, it kind of seemed like when you're looking at your resume, you go to McKendree, coach a position, come to Parkway. It was Parkway?
Belleville West.
Belleville.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking Parkway West. I think Coach Barnett went to Parkway West. I feel like
he might have.
That sounds right. But go coach quarterbacks, special teams coordinator, defensive backs. Was that just life happens, or was that like, let me check off all these boxes real quick?
No, that was 100% just life happens.
Okay.
Because
to me, that your plan's master. Like if you look back on it with the 2020 hindsight, you're like, okay, I'm going to be starting a program, an NIA program. I'm probably not going to have the largest budget. Let me learn every position. Obviously, running scout team. I'm sure you played some safety at some point. Running on the scout team at Colorado, so you knew a little bit about coverages and whatnot. And then from there, like, okay, to 2013, I believe it happens, like full send, let's do this, like type thing.
Yeah, no, that was just, again, like, as you said, life happens. God does different things in your life to try and prepare you that at the time you have no idea about, and that was just the journey. I was an offense. I played offense. I played a little bit of safety when I was in high school, but when I got to college, I was wide receiver, and I knew that I wanted to get into coaching.
Yeah. And
that was something I knew from very, very young. And so, even when, I couldn't even tell you how old I was. Maybe 13, 14 years old, I'd be sitting there breaking down basketball film.
Awesome.
and drawing plays. And it was just something I had a passion for. Well, when Coach Barnett offered me the opportunity to be help out, the only spot he had was on the defensive side.
Yeah.
So I was an offensive coach, and now I flip over and I work defense. And the guys in that room, Vince Okru is our defensive coordinator, who's coached for a very long time. I have tremendous respect for him. Chris Wilson was our defensive line coach, who's now coaching the XFL, but won a Super Bowl.
Is he with the Roughnecks? I feel like.
I believe so. Yeah. He won a Super Bowl with the Eagles.
Yeah.
So just the ability to be around some great guys. That was really the first time I coached defense. Well, then when I moved out here to Illinois, I was back on the offensive side for a long time, and then I get hired. I was kind of back and forth, as you mentioned, between high school and McKendree. I was a part-time kind of fill-in coach and loved every minute of it. Carl Pelker, who was the head coach there, started that program, always treated me great, learned a tremendous amount from. Jeff Fisher was the offensive coordinator, not the Jeff Fisher that was here at the Rams.
Mr. 7 and 9.
Yeah, but another different Jeff Fisher, but he is now the defensive coordinator at Wash U. So anyway, as I'm going through, when I got hired at full-time finally, Coach Fisher left McKendree to start the Lindenwood Belleville program, and I took his spot coaching quarterbacks. Well, as weird events happened that spring, I then got moved to coaching DBs and loved it. And I've actually coached defense almost my entire rest of my career since that move, which has been an interesting transition. But yeah, you mentioned just life happens, As I started this program, one of the first things I did was go to a rivals camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm standing there, and that camp, as you well know, Rivals has some of the top athletes, right? So, and it's run by former NFL coaches.
Yep.
And so as I'm there, I'm just kind of talking, and I meet this guy named Charlie Coe, who has now been the first guy I hired and has been with me since day one, and tremendous resume. And it's funny, kind of as God just kind of intertwines people in your life, as we're talking, I find out that he's looking for a job, and he was on staff with the University of Tennessee because a lot of his career was in the Division I ranks and with the NFL prior to me hiring him. But he was on staff with the University of Tennessee back in 1990, which would have been the year that Colorado won the national title, and they played Tennessee in a preseason opener. And me being around Colorado for my whole life, I remember that game because it was a tie, and I remember that game for a lot of different reasons. And so we were just talking back and forth about that game, and as you know, one of the next thing I know, he gives me his card, he sends me his resume, I hire him, and the rest is history. So just funny how life happens and all these things become intertwined. And I've been coaching defense ever since.
It's funny. I coached at a charter school in Charlotte for about one season, and originally went in. I was supposed to help out with like tight ends. Well, the linebackers coach quit, and I was listed maybe, as you could say, like defensive end, linebacker. You know, depending on what type of defense he ran, wasn't very good. Once again, 5'7". You know, you can have all the technique in the world, but when you're going against a guy like Ode Ibushi, who I played against, doesn't really matter. You know? They kind of eat you a little bit. So it was they were like, yeah, you played this position. I'm like, I mean, on paper, man, like I did a lot of kickoff, you know, and they're like, well, you're going to coach this now. So like, figure it out. And so I'm like calling my old coaches. I'm like, hey man, like, yeah, I know it's been 5 years. I didn't really know how to rip. Like, you know, how do you actually teach that? Cause I was just strong. I could do bull rushing and, you know, swims and whatnot, and they're like, I just feel like that's the same mentality of like you're calling all your former friends and like, hey man, how do I actually teach this kid? Because I always looked at like Barry Bonds as a batting coach. Like, what do you mean, just hit the ball?
Yeah.
You know, when sometimes you kind of get like, what do you mean you can't recognize the coverage? Like, how? You know. So.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. One of the things with coaching quarterbacks is I teach them a lot of how to read coverages, how to identify coverages and structure and all that. So when I started coaching defense and coaching DBs, it was a little bit of a natural progression. Now there's a lot of technique that you have to have, but you know, there's been great people. You know, the number of people that Coach Coe knows and has, introduced me to put around. I mean, it's unbelievable, you know, right? When we were starting, Tim Walton is a good friend of Coach Coe's, and he gets hired as the defensive coordinator here with the Rams. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, Tim becomes a guy that comes over, meets with me. You know, we kind of do some clinic stuff, still to keep in touch today. Now he's with Ohio State, but just tremendous, one of the best defensive back coaches, you know, that I've ever seen. You know, he had Jalen Ramsey for a long time down in Jacksonville, and just tremendous. And we'll be sitting in meetings now. Like Coach Coe coaches our D-line, so we're sitting in meetings, and I'll be like, well, what do you think about this? And, man, he'll open up his phone and call somebody, and he's like, hey, what do you think? And, you know, before you know it, we're on the phone with, you know, a defensive coordinator in the NFL or a former defensive coordinator in the NFL, or, you know, a guy who's got tremendous experience. So, you know, all those things, it's just been an unbelievable ride.
It's pretty crazy. And I don't know, you were touching on like earlier with the coverages and whatnot. Do you think that's what makes a guy like Vance Joseph a pretty solid defensive coordinator, because he was a quarterback at one point and then transitioning, you know, because I think he played DB and running back in the NFL, or probably he was
so.
Yeah, like I know he's stuck as a DB, but like that was, you know, obviously different type of offense, you know, not really the sexy, like, you know, spread the field out back then, but like, do you think a lot, because I'm sure there's a lot of quarterbacks who become pretty successful, like DB coaches and whatnot. Like I think Brad Sorensen, he played at Southern Utah, quarterback to DB coach.
Yeah, I think that you see it both directions. You know, people that were, you know, defensive players will sometimes switch over and be really good offensive coaches, and vice versa. I definitely think playing quarterback helps Vance be a great defensive coordinator, you know, and being around him, in the time that I was, he is extremely intelligent, and you know, especially on the football side. You know, he was really young in his coaching career when he was with us at Colorado, and you know, he was very advanced. Now, he had a lot of football in his background by the time he got into coaching. But, you know, I think the other thing, you know, is Vance was a guy who didn't play as much as he probably should have or could have had he gone somewhere else. You know, he a lot of his time was kind of in the shadow of Darian Hagan and some of those guys. But he did play and had a good career, but probably could have gone somewhere else and played more.
Do you think that's a shift from kind of Coach Neuheisel and like maybe that older style of coaching where like, because I remember I was coming up, like if the senior and junior are the same skill level, you always give it to the senior regardless of if he played his junior year or not. Like it was the senior's job to lose. You know, was that kind of shifted maybe with, you know, NIL just in general in college, but like the turnover in the coaching ranks is like, hey, figure it out now, or like you're out in 2 years type of thing?
Yeah, I think it's definitely shifted from the time Vance played. You know, Vance played under Bill McCartney, who was very, very old school.
Yeah.
You know, then you kind of had Neuheisel. But in today's world where you have the NIL, you have, you know, these 4 or 5 star, you have the portal, you have all that stuff, like you can't wait to get them on. You cannot wait as a coach to put them on the field if they deserve to be on the field.
Yeah.
I think that there's also this pressure as a coach now to find some way to get them involved. You know, playing the hierarchy, you can't do it because a lot of these guys as 4 or 5 star recruits are expecting to come in and have an impact. And if they're not having an impact, they're probably going to leave.
Yeah.
So it does put a little more pressure. You know, I think all of the college landscape with the NIL and the portal and all that is changing every day.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, talk to guys at the high Division I that are really doing the NIL stuff, and there's so many different ways of doing it. Like some places have an entire like front office that handle all the NIL contracts. You know, sometimes the position coach has to go in and do that. But you know, it's changing. I'm not going to say it's for the better, but you know, I think that's one of the great things about being at a smaller school. We don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have those high caliber athletes that are making decisions based on NIL.
That was going to be my next question. Is like, is that trickle down effect coming to you at MOBAP, or are you kind of, you know, we talked about a kid you were talking to today from, you know, Division II FCS level, but are you kind of getting these kids back to earth in a certain sense of like, okay, I was going to go to, I don't want to use Lindenwood, but, you know, I was going to go to SEMO, you know, for an example. Didn't work out. I was supposed to get, you know, a small NIL package and whatnot, and I spent 2 years on the bench type thing, and it just didn't work out to my favor. Do you see a lot of humbleness when people come to NAIA? Because if you don't know what it is, like you probably think it's junior college, when in reality it's its own independent organization. Guys have succeeded from, like Derek Ward, I think, from Ottawa. It was in Ottawa, Kansas, and then there, you know, Chris Wieland. I don't remember where he went, but he was with the Patriots, played in the XFL. Like, there are guys making careers. You know, Lindenwood was in NAIA, and that's where D.D. Dorsey came from. So it's like
Pierre Desir.
So yeah. So and then there was one kid, he played on the Browns, a little bit like Corey Schaeferling or something.
Yeah.
But
we had his son actually.
Oh, he's that old?
Well, he's getting older, but yeah, we had his son for a year.
Yeah. So I mean, like, is that kind of like a conversation where it kind of goes both ways as far as like an advantage but a disadvantage in like a weird way when you're building this program and whatnot?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we fight is people don't know the NAIA as much as they know the NCAA.
Yeah.
And so there is some of that education part of it. I think even coaches, high school coaches, when we go and recruit, they kind of associate us with more Division III.
Yeah.
But we're much more like Division II. We give scholarships. We need a high level of talent. We play in one of the toughest leagues, and there's been guys that we've played in year in and year out that have made it. You know, got in camps, that kind of stuff. So. Yeah, I mean that definitely. I don't know if sometimes the humility always comes, because I think there's still that, like, well, I should have this. I didn't get the opportunity. I think ultimately, in a lot of those cases, you see that it just wasn't the right fit level wise. But I think the guys that understand that come in and have a big successful career. The guys that are still kind of hung up on, well, they just didn't give me an opportunity or whatever, they're going to struggle a little bit, because the competition is really good. I think they walk in with this mindset, well, I'm gonna go and knock it out of the park, and all of a sudden they get out there and there's some really good athletes on the practice field. So the levels, it's impressive just how good these guys are. When you look at the high-level D1 of the guys that are separating themselves, I mean, those guys are special. And you can find them at every level. You really can. It's just they stand out.
Talk about building this program, and on two segues of it. One, the patience of the university, been not the most glamorous win-loss record.
Yeah.
But, just coming from, nothing to going up the ladder, and last year I think you guys went 4-7, division, way more competitive in the division, kind of seeing the fruits of the labor come to the centerfold right now. How has that process been?
It's been a challenge. I mean, you mentioned the patience of the university, which is great, but I think it's also teaching me a lot in patience, because I know when Coach Coe and I started the program, we were like, man, we're going to get this thing rolling right away. And there's been a lot of things throughout the process that have been challenging. The university's been tremendously supportive, but we've done it in kind of phases. Like when we first started, we were playing at CBC, and we were still trying to figure out locker room and space and all that. And in short order, the university invested in a great facility where we have coaches' offices and locker room. We had a practice field, but we didn't have bleachers. Then just recently, I think 3 years ago, coming right out of COVID, we finished our stadium on campus, and that's a tremendous stadium for all of our sports that use it. So like soccer, men's and women's soccer, lacrosse, there's a track, our track and field team uses it, we use it. But now we can have home games with bleachers, have our own stadium. And I'll tell you, that has really been the game changer. I think in today's collegiate environment, facilities is so important to these kids. And when they didn't like always going and playing at a high school, even though CBC is a tremendous facility.
But still,
you
want the logo, you want the blocked letters with your team name. I could be playing at Bishop Gorman in Vegas, but if I go to do the University of John Smith and it doesn't say University of John Smith, it's not that cool.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And what's becoming challenging for all small schools, Division II schools, D3 schools, NAI schools, is these high schools are pouring so much money into the facilities. It's unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Yeah, you go south, you go down into Arkansas, Texas, Tennessee. They all got indoor facilities. Yeah. They've got. I mean, it's putting a lot of pressure on smaller schools. So, having our stadium, having the things we have now, and the investment the university made was a huge game changer. Yeah. So we've been able to get better players. We've been able to show that we're making strides to be more competitive, and ultimately that's what it takes. Is being able to recruit, sign, get the players through the door that we need to be competitive, and we feel like we're getting there. But it's been a long process. There's no doubt.
It's funny. I was talking and. You might know this kid. He said he knew you, but talking to a kid who went to Seckman, he ended up going to Illinois College. His dad works for me, pretty good friends with his dad. And he said just the culture shock of the NAIA to him, really kind of changed some things in his mind as far as this isn't just, club football or whatever it is. Yeah. It's like I said, I gave some examples of guys who have air quote made it, and I'm sure there's way more that are coming down the pipeline. But between the education process and I was living in Atlanta for a little bit last year, this year, and kind of cross paths with some of these fathers who played at UGA and NFL and the Falcons, and they throw some money at these high schools. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It is like, y'all want to fix your parking lot first, man? Like,
yeah.
A lot of Beamers and a lot of G-Wagons rolling into those parking lots. It's pretty crazy in my opinion.
No, it is. And, I think one of the interesting things that we're going to have to see how it all shakes out, and again, will it impact us, but some of the states are starting to adopt NIL for high school.
You saw what Brian Woods did?
No, I didn't see that.
He is starting his own NIL league for juniors and seniors to go get paid to play high school football. Oh. I don't know what that means.
No, and I don't think it's good. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing in college. I know I'd probably take a lot of backlash on that, but I think there's a way to do it. If you're going to pay athletes, I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but I think the way that it's been rolled out is crazy.
Well, it's a recruiting tool. Like, it's one thing if I sell a jersey with mine. Like, I think 99.9% of people all think that's a reasonable thing. Like, this jersey isn't getting sold if it wasn't for me. Like, no one's buying it because it's Tom Smith Jersey Company. They're buying it because it has my name on it. Like, I think everyone agrees with that. But some of these, it gets goofy.
It gets really goofy. I know there's schools out there, and I won't name names, but I know there's schools out there where if you sign with them, you will get X number of NIL dollars.
Yeah.
There's schools out there where if they're allotted 86 scholarships, but if you're a walk-on like I was originally, well, hey, you're a walk-on, but we're going to give you this amount of NIL, so basically your school's paid for.
Yeah. A $37,000 NIL deal.
Right. It gets very goofy. I definitely don't think it's good in high school, but it is. And I'll tell you this, like, one of the things that I think I pride myself on in our program is that we have tremendous staff. We have guys that have been at a very high level, and we run it just like a whole lot of schools in our league. We run it as much like the big guys as we can, and so the time commitment, the meetings, the practice style, all of that is along the lines of what we did when I played for Coach Barnett, what a lot of people still do. And, it is a big time commitment. So that is a big difference for guys coming out of high school.
I definitely think it says a lot about, like, it's an overused word, the character of, like, coaches today. Maybe might be not the best thing to say, but just the adaptability of all you guys, from, the GA assistant to the head coach across all these smaller schools, like, figuring this out as, the processes are more streamlined, to the governments getting involved, to the leagues, the NCAA, the NIA, like, figuring all this out to me is like the limited stuff I've had to deal with NIL. Yeah. I have no idea what's going on. Like, it's a daunting thing, and I don't think a lot of coaches, and like you said, like, some of these universities have NIL departments now.
Yeah, and from talking to various guys, I think that's what's starting to drive, especially coaches that have been in it for 20, 25, 30 years, starting to push them out. Yeah. Because as coaches, the thing that we like to do, I think, across the board is we want to help young athletes, and I'll say that just because it doesn't pertain just to football, but we want to help young athletes. We love the game, and most of us love the strategy and competitiveness of it. And when you start getting all these other forms involved, it's a problem, And I think one of the biggest issues that I see with it is that you have really no recourse, right? So, like, if you play a professional sport, whether you're NFL, NBA, you name it, when they sign your contract, if you're not doing well, they're going to cut you.
Or they just, depending on guarantees, you're done, one and done type situation.
Right. You may have some guarantee. Here's your money. Boom. Keep it moving.
Best of luck.
Yeah. But if you don't show up to a meeting on time, you're fined. If you aren't doing the little things that we want you to do, you're fined. You miss a weight, you're fined. Well, that's not part of NIL.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, here's your money, and now the rest of it doesn't matter, which I don't think is a good thing.
No.
You know,
because what are you going to do to me? I'm going to go, you know, looking at Power 5 situation. If I don't like it, I'm going to go to LSU if I'm at, you know, Ohio State.
Exactly. And then you start having, you're good, just going to have the haves and the have-nots, and it's going to get even wider, right? Because take a Mizzou, for example, right? Mizzou has shown that they can be competitive.
Yeah.
They did it when I was playing. They did it when Gary Pinkel was there. You know, they've had moments, but they're not going to have the donor NIL pool that Alabama, Georgia have.
Yeah.
They're not going to have that Ohio State has. So you're going to further widen the gap. And if you got somebody that's getting NIL money at Mizzou, well, the next year they may just be shopping around because of the portal and how these two things go together that says, oh, well, I can go to this school. They're going to pay me more money. Well, is that what we're about? You know, and that's where I think a lot of collegiate coaches are like, you know, we were about the amateur aspect, you know, and that's the one great thing about our level, the D2 level, you know, is like we're still coaching kids that love the game because most our kids aren't getting full rides. They're still paying some. They love the game, and that's what's fun to be around.
Do you have a solution, like, because you know, you've addressed like a lot of concerns, and I think everyone's thing is that I've talked about is like, I just don't know what to do, and I don't think anyone does. You know, what do we do about this? Like, more regulation, but then it's like that gets goofy, and then they're introducing legislature. It's like, what are we doing here? Like,
yeah, I'm not saying I know what to do, but I think
and I'm not like trying to be like, well, you know, you can't talk about if you don't have a solution, you don't talk about the problem, because I don't think that's an appropriate statement whatsoever.
No, absolutely. I think, in my view, the biggest thing is, and the aspect that I come back to all the time is, how did the NCAA go from the number of crazy, strict rules that they had in regards to paying players to where we are now? Because when I played, and I'm an athlete on a team, and we want to go out to dinner with my parents or Tyler's parents, and they want to pay for my meal, or my parents want to pay for Tyler's meal, that is a violation.
And which is a pretty reasonable act of kindness. Or if the bartender says, hey, on us, good game, kids, because that happens in high school all the time too.
Right.
But now it's like, hey, here, come play with me, $500K, like that. You don't even have to be good. Everyone's cool with that. Like, to me, like,
absolutely,
I would rather someone give Reggie Bush's mom a house in like a weird way than like, you know, like, you know, you kind of go back and it gets weird. You know what I mean?
It gets weird, and I think you have to. I think they have to go back to what is NIL, and you hit on it. NIL is name, image, likeness.
Yeah.
If they are using somebody for an advertisement, pay them for doing that. Now, the reason they don't like that is because the honest truth is, guys like me at Colorado aren't going to be getting that money.
Yeah.
But I didn't deserve the money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just going to be real. Like, you know, Dan Graham, who is one of the top guys on our team, Cortland Johnson, who's one of the top running backs on our team, deserved the money.
Yeah.
If they were going to use them for that, they should have been used. You know, they sold number 7 jerseys in the store. That was Jay Sean Sykes. He should have seen some of that money.
Yeah.
I played with a guy who's very instrumental in getting all this change, Jeremy Bloom, and you know, I understand where Jeremy was coming from, because Jeremy at the time was a world-class skier.
Yep.
And he would go and win these events.
Yeah, I remember him now.
Yeah, and so, you know, Jeremy was a wide receiver. We were in the same room.
Yeah.
And I remember Jeremy had some type of nice car that he had won at one of the events prior to coming to Colorado. And he would go do these events and would win these prizes, and the NCAA made him choose whether he was going to be an Olympic skier or be a collegiate football player. That's ridiculous.
Well, it was even like YouTubers, like the kids like doing their YouTube thing. They were telling kids they couldn't do that. These kids are making $10,000 a month. You know, it's good money, especially at the college level.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the third string tight end just showing me a little bit about what life is like at Oklahoma. Like, this is it for him in football. Like, he's gonna go be an accountant or sell insurance, man. Like, like let this guy ride this wave, make let's say $300,000, and enjoy his life a little bit more than whatever he's got going on. So
yeah, I mean, and so all of those things I have no problem with.
Yeah.
When you start just saying, okay, here's money, I think you look at Spencer Rattler, right? He makes a ton of money going to Oklahoma, never produced.
Yeah.
He didn't produce there.
Yeah.
And so why is he getting the money? Basically it's becoming a bidding war.
Yeah.
And I heard one, I don't even remember who told me, but one collegiate coach basically said that basically what NIL did is we used to take McDonald's bags into high schools to meet with recruits that was full of money, and now we can just give them the money and actually give them a burger in the McDonald's bag. They don't have to hide anymore. But had it been going on, yeah, but it's also gotten out of control.
Yeah, I feel like when it's a little bit more coy, it's a little bit more acceptable. You know what I mean? Like, at least you gotta kind of be like smart. Like, no one cares about what happens inside your house, but the second you start yelling at your wife on in the lawn and I see it, then it's an issue.
Yeah,
not that I was advocating for domestic abuse, by the way.
No, but there was punishment for those that did get caught, so that helped toe the line a little bit. Yeah. Now it's who can pay the most money to get the kid.
Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. I feel like we can keep going, and I hope to have you come back.
Absolutely, love
Coach, thank you so much for coming on. Probably do a Colorado. We can break your career down. Mobap, Colorado, and
there you go.
Everything else in between. But
anytime.
40 seconds left. Where can people find you on the social medias?
Yeah, you can find me at MBU Coach B on Twitter. I think it's just my name, Jason Burianek, on Instagram, and anytime you want to come out to a game, MBUSpartans.com has our schedule, and we're looking forward to this year.
And I will be there.
Sounds good. We'd love to have you. Let me know. Be our guest.
Thanks.
Pleasure. Good seeing you.